Scott Dochterman. Chad Leistikow. Together on one pod, talking odds and all things Big Ten. Powered by GameDay Men's Health, with locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Legends and Listeners. Exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere, including here in Indianapolis. Special edition episode 51 of Legends and Listeners is here on the Iowa Everywhere Network and coming to you live. Well, actually recorded, technically, but still from the Channel Seed Studios. I am Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, joined by the Athletics, Scott Dochterman. As I said, Scott, we're recording this on Wednesday night. You just finished an extremely busy day of work, and I know your head is spinning as we speak, so this show could be a bit of a wild card as we go here. You literally just filed your story as we're getting ready to start.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, there's so many different topics I'm working on. I think I ended up with like 20 different interviews from today, from whether it was on the side, podium, or wherever, and got switched to a different story midway through the day thanks to DeShaun Foster. I mean, can you imagine walking in the day, I'm going to write about UCLA football, but after his 15-second brain fart, it was really more of a, they kind of forced it on us. Yeah. But he was fascinating to talk to about it because it's almost refreshing in how little he cares about that part of it. It wasn't so much talking to us. It was more about just, I got up there, I started to talk about it. And then I thought, you know what? You guys don't really want to hear about this. So I'll just go to your questions. But he said, I asked him, I said, were you waiting for somebody to say something to you about it? He's like, yeah. So he thought somebody was going to jump in and say, go ahead with your questions. So anyway,
well,
interesting.
Our wonderful producer, Aiden, has the clip because if you missed it, here it is. And then we'll go from there. Here it is. It's cringy.
Coach Foster, welcome to the Big Ten. We'll begin with your opening statement.
How you guys doing? I'm happy to be here. Glad to be a part of this great conference. Finally putting two great emblems together, UCLA and the Big Ten. We're a school that's won, 123 championships, so this fits us being right in this conference. Football-wise, we're just excited. I'm sure you guys don't know too much about UCLA, but our football program, but we're in LA.
Hence UCLA.
It's us and USC. I'm just basically excited, really. That's it. Any questions?
So
I'm basically excited. That's it.
It's kind of endearing in a way. I mean, is he like a Jim Harbaugh eccentric type of guy, or was it just a total brain fart?
He's Jim Harbaugh, and I guess that's a good comparison because he just doesn't have it's sincere. He doesn't really care. It's not that he's being a jerk. It was just more of a laugh like him, but it's just I don't think he didn't have any prepared comments. That's obvious. And, he mentioned a couple of times, one Iowa reporter had asked him on the side about, whether Iowa coming to the UCLA, and he kind of responds like, what do you know about LA? As part of his comeback, and then the Iowa TV reporter asked him, what should Iowa fans do when they're in LA? Which I'm kind of at that point, I'm looking at other reporters and they're like rolling their eyes in the back of their head, and he's just like, oh, they should hop on some birds. He's like, what do you mean birds? And he's like, well, they should just ride some scooters around LA. I think he's being sarcastic but sincere. It's not being a jerk. It's just who he is. And so if he wins, then people are going to follow him. If he loses, it's going to be a spectacular failure.
Yeah, it's a great way to, I guess, kick off this 18-team Big Ten conversation, Scott. It's obviously the first time we're covering a 3-day media days. And UCLA was first up today. It was the first West Coast program of all 4 of them. 2 were today, UCLA, USC. 2 are on Thursday, Oregon and Washington. But what do you make? You listened to Tony Petitti at length yesterday, and I believe you talked to him as well, right? And I don't know. What do you just kind of make of this whole? What is your feeling as we enter this 18-team deal, and what kind of vibes are you getting coming out of this so far?
Yeah, I talked to him, one-on-one tomorrow, so I'm excited about that. But what he had to say was pretty typical from the podium. I didn't get any kind of good read from him on that. But I think the thing is, Chad, now that we're entering 18 teams in the Big Ten and no divisions, it seems like there is an excitement. Like the Big Ten, not as it's arrived, but the Big Ten is big. It's the Big Ten now, kind of strutting itself a little bit. I mean, it's obvious when you have Michigan, who played for won the national championship, and Washington, who played for the national championship, and Oregon won 12 games last year. And then, oh, by the way, USC has got some pretty good tradition too, and UCLA did and sometimes does. But I think overall, you kind of get this different type of swagger to the league. Like they feel like they've earned the right to be in that conversation for being number 1 or number 1B, in football. And I think they kind of have, Chad. When you have the programs that they have, they're going to match up, and we know the SEC is going to as well. So it's just a different vibe and a different swagger than maybe it's had in the past.
Yeah, I wrote a little bit about expansion as well to kind of kick things off. And I'm genuinely excited for this. I know some people aren't. I'm excited for this iteration of the Big Ten. I don't want it to get any bigger. I think they need to let 18 teams breathe for a while. And I kind of wrote about that too, like how, if you keep adding football powers, pretty soon it's pretty easy for those mid-pack teams to become a lot less exciting, a lot less relevant. But that's beside the point. But I'm excited for, the matchups like Ohio State, Oregon, USC, Penn State, Michigan, Oregon, in the Big House, Iowa, UCLA. There's a lot of really fun stuff going on. I think Wisconsin. They're all over. Wisconsin, USC, maybe. Yeah. They're all over the place. I think it's going to be cool right out of the gate. It's a chance, for, a team like, let's say a team like Iowa. What if a team like Iowa sneaks up, and makes that top 2 this year? It's not impossible. Especially with Oregon's tough schedule. You never know. They may lose a couple. I don't know. It's exciting to me to have this deal. We'll see if it wears thin. I'm not as excited for the other sports, but for football, I'm excited.
Yeah, well, it's always about football. That's the only reason why expansion really exists, because of football revenue and what they're able to do and what they're able to maximize. And, Oregon and Washington each took pretty sizable chops, from the rest of the league. They're only going to get half shares and for until their vested members at 2029, whereas USC and UCLA walk in the door making the same as all the Big Ten teams. But this is I like this for football for all the reasons you mentioned, Chad. I think you look at the the helmet matchups, as I kind of call them. When even if you see two teams like UCLA and Nebraska, when you just kind of stand up and pay attention, even though they haven't had a lot of success lately, but those teams, kind of resonate. And then Washington comes to Kinnick Stadium. That's going to be fantastic. Or, the last time they played was in the Sun Bowl, right? And then a couple of Rose Bowls before that.
Right.
And then you look at, Oregon goes to Camp Randall in late November. That's the one that kind of points me into this opportunity for Iowa, probably Penn State, but Iowa as well. That, let's say Oregon loses a close game to Ohio State in mid-October. And everybody's kind of going through the season. Well, a trip to Camp Randall, as we've known all these years, is not easy, even if they're transitioning a little bit to a different style.
Yeah, you don't get that in the Pac-12. You just don't. You don't have those kind of weather games. Maybe Washington State, maybe, but probably not. Probably not.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So going there, 80,000 people, jump around, crazy atmosphere, defense, weather, things can happen. They go to the Big House as well,
Early,
with Michigan, earlier in that month. So on November 2nd. So things can happen to put Iowa in a position of success. Now it's all going to come down to what happens offensively. We know that. If they're even close to what let's say they were like they were in 2021, which they weren't any good there either, but at times they could actually score.
They were for a while. Maryland game.
Yeah.
Penn State, they weren't bad.
6 touchdowns or 6 interceptions of Maryland quarterbacks that day.
Was it 7? I thought it was 7.
It might be 7. I don't know.
Maybe it was 7 turnovers. Yeah. Might have been 7 turnovers.
Yeah, because Sebastian Castro had that just crushing hit on.
Yeah.
But even then, they scored 23 points against Penn State. They're not scoring 43. Mm-hmm. So if they even get to that point, maybe they got a chance to run the race and end up in Indianapolis again, where we are right now.
Well, we'll talk some Hawkeyes here in a second, but first I want to give thanks, as always, to our presenting sponsor of Legends and Listeners. That's GameDay Men's Health. Man, if you've been dragging your feet on this, it's time to get yourself right and get back into the game with GameDay Men's Health. They specialize in lots of areas, including testosterone replacement therapy. Low T is very common, nothing to be ashamed of. It's natural, but you can do something about it. And GameDay Men's Health can do so much more than that. It can help your mood, your muscle mass, your sex drive, your energy levels. Get your free private, no obligation consultation today. Check them out at GameDayMen'sHealth.com or call one of their locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, where I go, or North Liberty, where Scott goes. Yeah. Very, 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 very easy. I want to tell you, Scott, like when I go in every Monday, I'm probably in and out in 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's quick. It's quick and easy. No, that's it. And you feel good the rest of the week. So I love it.
Yeah, I feel some, more energy than I did before. And the numbers have changed a little bit for me. And I really like that. And, and I can't say enough good things about the people I deal with, Stacy Michaels in North Liberty. And as you said, the thing is for guys, me, you, I'm sure anyone else, the thing you hate the most is waiting. I am so impatient. And the fact that you could walk in the door and just about, even if there are a couple of people there, you're in and out. It's like, okay, we're ready for you. Boom, 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 out. And the staff is great to work with. So I've been thrilled with my experiences with them.
Well, Scott, we didn't really talk about format at all today because you've been busy. I've been busy. It's been a wild day. So do you want to dig into Hawkeyes stuff now? And I've also got maybe a section where we look at some Iowa opponents as well coming out of here. So what do you want to do first?
Let's do Iowa.
Yeah.
There was a lot of Iowa discussions and some good things.
Yeah, it was Iowa Day. I will throw it to you first because there's so much on my mind. My head's spinning. I've written a lot of different things. We had Beth Getz, which is interesting. That could be another little thread we go into. Kirk Ferentz seemed like 7 different spots. And there's a depth chart. So where do you want to start?
I'm in the same boat you are. I'm like trying to remember everything that took place here on this. You know what? Let's go with depth chart, Chad. I mean, that's kind of where it starts. I mean, there was nothing from Iowa that is so like breaking news. We got to press this. But I do think that people are interested, obviously, in the depth chart, and I think there were some. I don't know about surprises is the right word, but I think there were some things that made you perk up. At least with me, and I think number one is Jarrett Bowie. He was a guy who
first name on the depth chart.
Yeah, played very sparingly last year. Got in a couple of games, didn't really do anything of note, and then here he is as a starter. And Kirk said some pretty good things about him. I thought. I mean, he's really he seems to be very excited about him and his potential.
Yeah, let's start on offense. One thing that I actually missed the first time I buzzed through it was that they listed 3 receiver positions instead of 2. It used to be 2. And the starters, the starters are Jarrett Bowie at presumably the X. I asked him what he was working at. He said the X, so I assume he kind of took Jacob Bostic's spot. Seth Anderson also, listed in that slot area with Caden Weechin as his backup. So that was interesting too, because Weechin was kind of a star of the spring, or name of the spring. And then at the Z, you've got, unless that's the slot, I guess we don't have a clarification on that, is Caleb Brown. And he's backed up by Terrell Washington Jr. Bowie's backed up by Dayton Howard. So those are your 6 names. And then Ferentz said in our last side session with him, I was like, because I asked him that question. I was like, okay, you got Bowie and on the one line, Anderson, who's constantly been hurt on the one line, and Caleb Brown, who had no WI on the one line.
Yeah.
Like, does that give you more excitement that those guys are on top, or is that a sign of this position's is kind of in trouble? And he said he's pretty optimistic about the receivers. Did you catch that? I mean, what did you make of that?
I heard him say it, and it kind of perked my ears up because that's like the one position I'm least optimistic about. And maybe he's more optimistic about them than zero, which is, hey, I think they're going to be terrible. They're not going to catch a pass. And well, they're going to surprise me with 7 catches, in their first game or something like that. Yeah. It's fascinating to look at these guys, as you said. Bowie has barely played, no catches. And then, Seth Anderson, who came with some potential. It got overshadowed a little bit by Caleb Brown coming in, for being from Ohio State. But remember, Seth Anderson, was the Big South Freshman of the Year just 2 years ago at Charleston Southern. And his dad is Willie Flipper Anderson, who is an outstanding NFL receiver. And, he caught first pass of the season, he caught for a touchdown last year from Cade McNamara. And then, and then finally with Caleb Brown, we know he's not going to play in the opener. And that was confirmed today from Kirk Ferentz, who said it was 1 game. But seeing Terrell Washington out there is kind of interesting. And then Caden Weechin, as you said, but the one other thing we should probably not read into as much is with wide receiver, it doesn't necessarily mean they're playing that position. There'll be guys who move and do different things. Yeah.
More intrigue on offense to me was, we'll get to quarterback, I promise, but offensive line. Logan Jones kind of let this slip the other day that Bo Stevens was playing next to him at left guard, and he is listed as the starter at left guard. Kind of interesting that Nick DeYoung is the backup right guard. When I had George Barnett on Hawk Central, DeYoung was kind of ticketed as a swing tackle, and they want to keep him out. They like their guards. He liked Leighton Jones when we talked. Leighton Jones isn't on here. Trevor Locke is at backup right tackle, but they've got Jack Dotzler at backup left tackle. I don't know if it means anything. Dotzler's size has gone up a lot, by the way. But Bo Stevens, that would be emblematic of the optimism that Kirk Ferentz seems to have about this offensive line, because he's a guy that's 6'6", 322. He's the biggest guy in their entire offensive line. He was hurt last year. So was Mason Richmond. So was Logan Jones.
Yeah.
Jennings Dunker went down hard in that Nebraska game. They were banged up last year outside of Connor Colby. And that's another one where Ferentz seems optimistic. And if Stevens can be the guy there, he started 2 years ago, 10 games. I like the looks of that line, Scott.
Right. There's a lot to like if they reach their potential. And, I've had lots of conversations on the side from people about what's going on there. They've always been emblematic of being a really good line. And there are a lot of reasons. And we've discussed some of those reasons, for everything from recruits not panning out to injuries and to, departures, whatever. But, they bring back out of that core group 155 career starts. That's pretty impressive. And Bo Stevens 2 years ago was not really ready, but he did start 10 games. And he was kind of a physical player. He's big, 6'6", 322. It seems like size is something that really matters with this offensive line on the field. And I think that's something that's, kind of impressive. Now, Nick DeYoung, and we know this every year when it comes to the depth chart. And that is Nick DeYoung is penciled in at right guard. And part of this is Kirk even likes to throw names out there because people like names. Nick DeYoung is going to be the number one backup at like 4 different positions.
Yeah.
Fair. He is probably the swing tackle, but it's like, if you put him there, then, we want to get Jack Dotzler's name out there, or Trevor Lau, kind of throw him a bone a little bit. Hey, your name's on the depth chart. But in week 1 or against Iowa State, one of them has a sprained ankle or an owie and has to come out for a series. It's going to be Nick DeYoung going out there, So, or Tyler Ellsbury, possibly a guard. But, that's where he kept saying we have 7 guys, and those are the 7 that we know of. The other ones, I imagine Cade Bodrud's going to do some nice things too, but he's not out there because he just joined the team.
Right. Yeah. Good point. And when we had Barnett on the show, he said Bodrud would probably start out at guard, which I thought he would be at center, but I think they really like the idea of Jones and Ellsbury at center, and allow, that's another guard, throw another guard into the mix. And that's another reason to move DeYoung out to tackle. But interesting. We saw Kamari Moulton jump Jazz Patterson in the spring game. He is listed as the number 3 running back, but quarterback was the most interesting, puzzling maybe, that Brendan Sullivan was number 3, but behind Linez and obviously McNamara won. But Ferentz made it clear, Scott, on multiple occasions that McNamara is the clear starter. There's not really a competition. And McNamara, when he spoke to the media, just did not seem concerned at all about a competition. He's like, they got to bring in somebody at some point. Like, I'm the starter, basically. So anyway, what do you make in the confidence of Cade right now from Kirk? And he said he thinks they can have a good offense. What do you make of those statements?
Cade is the quarterback. He handles himself like a quarterback. He has a proven track record with a really good team a couple of years ago. There's no reason to think that he's not going to be the starting quarterback and given every opportunity to not only play, but play as long as he can, Now, injuries are going to be a factor with him. He's only played in 8 games the last 2 years. And last year he had an ACL. The year before he had a knee injury. And so there's there's going to be some question marks there with that. And, as far as the pecking order goes at quarterback, it says something that Brendan Sullivan still is made the list, at least, and not just Marco Lainez, because, they brought him in. He was a starter at Northwestern and came in for that. But because I know some people have had questions like, I thought he was number 2. Well, again, let the process play out. Jacob Gill's not on there, and he's from Northwestern transfer, and he's probably somebody that can work into that competition at wide receiver, I would assume. Kirk's saying he thinks they can have a good offense. I don't know. I am really on. I'll believe it when I see it. I think they could be a better offense. I think they have the potential to be a decent offense. But until I see the receivers in action against these defensive backs and catching passes and breaking tackles and having big gains, I'll reserve judgment on the word good. I'm just not there.
All right, let's flip to defense where let's start with kind of the good news, I guess, which would be, or the whatever news, appealing news. Cornerback depth seems pretty good. John Nestor jumps to number one at left cornerback, basically replacing Cooper DeJean. And we've had the memes of the white cornerbacks coming out today with the Nestor news, and he's also the backup cash. So that's another indication that they love Nestor. DeShaun Lee, who started games last year for the Hawks, he's number two. TJ Hall, who Kirk Ferentz said had a really good spring, is number two. So those four guys, when you throw in Jamari Harris, you have to feel pretty good about where they are on the back end.
Yeah, they're in a good spot there with them, and I know TJ's listed as a junior. I think they could probably list him as a sophomore because he pretty much redshirted last year. You've got to like what you see there because it was a question before. Going back, remember 2 years ago, Chad, in that that Nebraska game. I mean, and TJ Hall had to play. And then ultimately it was after Cooper DeJean got knocked out, then you had, Jamison Hines coming in. They're really depleted there. Well, now you feel like you have probably four starting caliber players. DeShaun Lee played pretty well, I thought, last year. But if they're seeing something in John Nestor that makes him number one, that's good for them. I mean, that he's capable of doing that. And, TJ Hall, was expected to have a pretty big role, and he's improved. And DeShaun Lee has some experience. And then, of course, we've not talked about Jamari Harris, who I think has that potential to really take off and be that good senior story that Iowa likes to promote. And I do. I mean, I think he's long-armed. He's a good corner. He's finally, not only healthy, but out of the woods for minor trouble from last year.
Right.
So there's a lot to like at corner, Chad.
Yeah, let me just pivot before we get to D-line, because that was the kind of the concern area I felt like that came out today. I want to talk about Quinn Schulte for just a second, because there's a lot of sixth-year seniors they could have brought to Big Ten Media Days, fifth-year seniors they could have brought to Big Ten Media Days. Deontay Craig, Jamari Harris, Sebastian Castro, they could have brought any of those guys. Nick Jackson even. But they brought Quinn Schulte, and he ended up being the one I was most interested to talk to, because walk-ons are an endangered species potentially in the new college football future. And these walk-on stories are so pivotal at Iowa. And you know this better than I do, but it sounds like, once you talk about the roster limits, they're currently like 130 guys on the team around, give or take.
Yeah.
By the way, Aiden Hall no longer on the team, safety, not going to play football, I guess. That's what Kirk said anyway.
Yeah.
Quinn Schulte, I mean, underappreciated guy is the vibe I got from so many people today. Jay Higgins said, I vote for him every week in the leadership meeting. I vote for him as captain. Like, they think the world of Quinn Schulte in that building.
And that's the way it's been for several years now. I mean, he's going into his third year as a starter. You kind of look at him and think traditional Iowa safety. He's from, it's kind of a long line of parochial safeties that were walk-ons and
assumption.
Dowling, with Jack Kerner and then Jake Gervais. Brett Greenwood was from Pleasant Valley, so he wasn't parochial, but still in Iowa high school. It's like, if you were a good safety, from an Iowa high school, you're going to have an opportunity to play. And, if you're a walk-on, although, Zach Lutmer, scholarship guy, but same type of background in some ways from Central Lyon, I suppose. But Quinn is, and then this is where the issues are with the walk-ons, as you said. I mean, what's going to get voted on and finalized as soon as this week is 105 is going to be the number and for football, and it's 105 roster limits. No longer will there be, it's going to be classified as roster limits, not scholarship limits. So now it's 85 scholarships and ... for what you want to bring on. And you do have to be cognizant of some Title IX situations, but even so, now you can only have 105 players on your roster, which means that all those walk-ons can go, because you could scholarship 105 guys, or you can split them up. If you want to, you can say, well, we're going to partially scholarship 10 guys or 15 guys or something like that, which you're capable of doing. But I don't think a lot of schools are going to do that. But for good stories like the Quinn Schulte, not forgetting Dallas Clark, but for the Quinn Schultes of the world, Jake Gervais, Jack Kerner, what's their next step? What do they do instead of going to Iowa, walking in the door after proving themselves, and next thing you know, they work their way up to being a starter and a really good player? What's their next step? And that's really the sad part of this, because Iowa has made a living on that, in part because they actively recruit those players that have, hey, you have a scholarship opportunity from South Dakota or Northern Iowa, but you can come here and walk on, and we'll give you that opportunity to compete at Iowa. That now they're, where are they going to go? And because some of these guys are just not going to scholarship right off the bat. They just don't fit their profile for what you want. But in 3 years, you might want to snag them from those schools. So I don't know, Chad. I think it's kind of a loss in some ways. It's inevitable. This is what's going to happen, but it is kind of a loss, I think, overall to the sport.
Yeah, I just wonder if more guys will go. The Quinn Schultes, he had an offer from South Dakota State, for example, and walk-on offers at Iowa and Iowa State, and a partial at UNI is what he told me.
Yeah.
And so he chose Iowa. But maybe in the future, those guys will, go the FCS route, and then they can transfer, I guess, back home, so to speak, like a Cade Beaurude, story or something. I don't know. But, so I don't want to say it's dead, but like the walk-on stuff is really important to Iowa. And until very recently, that's how kickers and punters started also in Iowa. So it is a notable development that is coming. And it's complicated. We talked to Beth Getz about a lot of different things. That was one of the things today that came up. But I don't know if we'll get to what she said. But that was interesting as well. Let's finish the depth chart quick. And then maybe move to other things on the Hawks. D-line. I am fine with the 4 starters that are on there, and it seems like Kirk Ferentz is needing more depth. So you got Deontay Craig, Aaron Graves, Y.A. Black, and Ethan Herget. We knew those would be the starters. Your backups are currently Max Llewellyn from left to right, Jeff Bowie, Jeremiah Pittman, Brian Allen, and then they even listed a third string, Scott, Kenneth Merriweather, Will Hubert, Luke Gaffney, and Caden Crawford. So a lot of names on there, but really it's almost like those guys haven't proven themselves yet they're on the depth chart. It's kind of one of those weird things, like they just for some reason listed 3 at each position.
Right. And I kind of like that in some ways for this group, because you look at the 2 guys that and defensive tackle listed as third team, they also got a lot of heavy backup snaps, and they might work their way in there, because I kind of think they've got 3 defensive tackles right now, Pittman being the third. Bowie has been an injury-plagued, had a tough career so far and very injury-plagued. But, now, he's built like a monster. I saw him. He was working for DoorDash. I was last week when I was over at Panera Bread in between like the basketball and football interviews and stuff that day. I saw him like come in like 3 or 4 times at Panera Bread, and I'm like, oh, okay. But Luke Gaffney and Will Hubert have been, they were in the rotating a lot, and they've got a chance, and they're both pretty young. They're both sophomores. They fit that profile of those walk-on types that we've talked about. I mean, a Sam Brinks, there's not much separation from them. And even Nathan Budgeta, who got a scholarship right away, he was kind of in that same ballpark. So, I don't have a problem with that. And I think it reflects well of Kenny Merriweather, and Caden Crawford, that they're at least listed. And I think part of that is because, now they're starting to work on things, and maybe they don't feel like there's a lot of differences between Kenny Merriweather and, maybe getting on the field and playing some important snaps. And Caden Crawford has worked pretty hard. He was an early entry, and so he and Brian Allen both. And so I think I like the fact that they listed their names, because they're going to need some depth there. They always do. And they've been much better as a defense since they went from rotating 6 to 8 or 9.
Yeah, it feels like to me it's an admission that nobody's really earned the 2 line yet. And so that makes sense to me too. And that is what Kirk Ferentz said. It was, I can't remember, Elliott might have asked him about the D line. He's like, yeah, I'm kind of interested in that. Like, I'm not like sold on the D line, is what the vibe I got from Ferentz. And he's right. I mean, they got to have depth there. All those 8 guys we just listed, the backups, like, they're one snap away from starting.
Right.
One injury to Aaron Graves away from, you got to have a backup plan. This is a big month for the D-line in particular. Ferentz also wants to see development on the O-line besides those top 7, because he's talking about next year already. They're going to lose a lot of guys after this year on that O-line. So they don't want to be back where they were in 2021 again.
Right. I'll tell you what, though, Chad, just for positive sake, that tackle combination could be one of the best in the country. Aaron Graves and Y.A. Black. I think they both are just outstanding. I think Y.A. coming back boosted his profile from being maybe a 5th rounder to a top 75 pick in the draft next year. And his statistics won't reflect that. And that's part of Iowa's defense. But the next level people will recognize it. They're not going to go, well, we're going to draft him because he had 58 tackles and this other guy had only 44. The way Iowa plays, their tackles in a lot of cases, that 2-gap scheme, they control the line of scrimmage but Jay Higgins is the one who ends up with the tackles, and Nick Jackson ends up with 100 tackles, and Y.A. Black ends up with 2 tackles a game, but he may be the best player on the line of scrimmage doing it. And so when you look at scheme, don't judge the player by the scheme, in some ways. And Aaron Graves, we've all known his upside. What's the upside? A lot of it for him. And I think I
see what you did there.
Yeah, I think he's got it in spades. And remember, he's just 2 years away from graduating from high school / community college, because he did both in the same year, and he's already into his major. He already graduated from Iowa. It was in 2 years. It's just insane how smart this kid is. And then he's also up to 300 pounds. I think he can be a terror this year in the Big Ten.
Well, we haven't checked, but there's one way to find out if Indianapolis has Steeple Ridge bourbon, but we want to thank Steeple Ridge for their support. I'm not sure if it makes it all the way out here to Indiana. Steeple Ridge delivers high quality, delicious drinking, award-winning craft bourbon. If you don't find Steeple Ridge at your favorite retailer or at where were we at last night? The Yard something?
Yard Marks, yeah, or something like
Yard Work? No, Yard. Yeah. God, what is that? The Yard place down there. Ask for it by name. Steeple Ridge is distilled, aged, and bottled in Iowa by Lonely Oak Distillery. You can tell me and Scott are kind of lame. We just sort of finish our dinner and come back to our room.
Not last night. Last night I stayed out too late.
I
you did.
So, okay, throw it to you here. Do you want to do Beth Getz conversation, or should we get into kind of some of the other teams in the Big Ten, where Iowa is in the preseason poll? What do you want to go with?
Yeah, I think we can go in multiple situations, but I think right now there's still enough unsettledness with the big picture regarding the scholarships, regarding money, that it maybe behoove us now to go into a little bit more of the Big Ten poll, just in other teams, because this is primarily a football week, and everything should be ironed out. Well, not the financial part of it, but a lot of stuff will be ironed out later this week. So, okay. I don't know, Chad. What did you think of the poll? I think we both voted on it, or at least the Big Ten with the Kings of the North. The King of the North.
I did not vote in that one, but in the Gannett poll, which we vote on now, Iowa was 6th in the Big Ten, and then in the Cleveland.com, Iowa was 5th in the Big Ten. So pretty much the same top 6, though. Iowa's 5th in one, 6th in the other. USC is 5th in one, 6th in the other. Michigan, Penn State, 3, 4, depending on the order. And then, of course, Ohio State 1, Oregon 2. So those are kind of your top 6. Seemed like Wisconsin, Nebraska were consensus 7, 8. So that's kind of your upper crust, I guess, of the Big Ten this year. I felt like it's fair. I don't think too many people out there are probably going to vote Iowa ahead of Michigan or Penn State. And, considering Penn State beat Iowa 31-0 last year, that makes sense to me. I think 5th is about right.
Yeah, and Michigan shut out Iowa 26-0 too. So I think they kind of need to earn that ranking, and it's funny because you would have thought in the past Iowa ranked 6th in the Big Ten, and you're like, well, yeah, when they had 11 teams, that might be grounds for being a little upset. You're talking about 18 teams, upper third. That's pretty good. And 5th, 6th, I buy that. And, we've talked about a little bit, Chad, that, I think this team's got some potential to be in that competitive arena, whether it's for a playoff or it's from other, ventures. But, they've got to get better on offense. We know that. Their defense has to, make a few strides here and there, and they should do that. But to be mentioned with those teams, I think speaks a lot for the respect that people have for them, because, this league is so deep now. It's really kind of entertaining to see.
So 7, as we speak, 7 of Iowa's 9 opponents have gone to the podium, through this whole deal. The only 2 that haven't, unless I'm mistaken, Minnesota and Washington. They go on Thursday. Ohio State, I'll go in order of opponent here. Ohio State, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Northwestern. Maybe I got those flipped. UCLA, Maryland, and Nebraska are in the
Maryland's
books
tomorrow. Maryland's tomorrow.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're right. I was confused because we talked to Brian Ferentz today.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, takeaways from any of those opponents that we heard from this week, and if you feel, I don't know, better or worse about Iowa's schedule after hearing from some of these teams.
Well, I don't feel very confident for Iowa going to Ohio State, and that's not necessarily from what I heard. It's just what I know. I mean, this is as good of a – I mean, they built this Big Ten team to be, defensively, it's as good as – it's probably better than Iowa on defense, frankly. They just have more pieces and better
horses, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and really, to me, I think the difference is probably edge, that they just have edge defenders that I know Iowa doesn't really have. But Iowa's right there. I'm not going to say that Iowa's it's a fractional at that point. Among the others, Northwestern was intriguing, but they're kind of, now that they're in year 2-ish of David Braun, I mean, they're kind of unsettled in some spots. I don't know that I learned a whole lot from them. Zach Lujan is their offensive coordinator. I found out yesterday, one thing I learned, that the J is silent. So that was told to me and informed to me. So, and I'll never forget it again. But
wow, must have been a stern warning.
It was the first thing somebody told me. So I was like,
wow, okay,
thank you. And I'm sorry, I forgot. I do like your word. Well, usually you save that, but never. Anyway.
Yeah, there's a better way to say that. But anyway,
yeah,
Lujan. All right, I'll try to do
Lujan.
it too. Lujan.
I'm high on Zach Lujan. I think he's going to be the next big thing in coaching because he was great at South Dakota State. He's young. He's like 29 or 30. So I think they've got some good pieces there. I'm just not sure that they've got all what they need to be competitive for mid-range on up in the Big Ten this year. I think they're probably more of a 6-7 win team at their height. Among the others, Michigan State went today.
Yeah, what do you think of them? Like that seems to be I have no idea what to expect from them. Zero.
I just cannot see Michigan State being able to come out and be successful this year. They lost, I tracked it, like 47 players since the middle part of last year to the portal. That's just obscene. And a lot of them went to really good schools, so they were good players too. But and then, they brought in some good players. I think Jonathan Smith's a really good coach. He went, he was great at Oregon State. He brought in his kind of phenom quarterback from there, Aiden Childs, and Jack Velling was the first team all Pac-12 tight end. They've got good pieces, and Michigan State's always fairly athletic, but it's just, and the murderer's row that they have to run. I mean, I don't think there's a 4-week block that anybody has ever had that's worse. Ohio State, then 6 days later, they go to Oregon. Then they play Iowa and Michigan.
Wow.
So they're looking at Iowa as like the reprieve in some ways, and nobody else looks at Iowa's defense as a reprieve. So
wow,
I think they could struggle quite a bit this year, and even if they improve, it's just not going to be. It's going to be, immeasurable. And then, Wisconsin's intriguing to me, Chad. Year or two of Phil Longo's offense, and how last year they went from like the last year when they had Jim Leonard / Paul Christ, they were like 30% 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers. Last year they were like 90%, and it's an experiment that I'm not sure is going to work. I mean, they leaned in. Iowa and Wisconsin were really self-aware and knew what they were, and right now they don't. I mean, they're trying to be something that has never worked there before. And if it works, it's spectacular. But if it backfires, it could really cost them. And so overall, Luke Fickell seems more, there's no pressure per se, but he just seems more focused on, we're not, no BSing around. We need to get better, and period. And they made some really good, smart transfer portal additions. So I think they've got a chance to be better, but they're still very intriguing to me.
Yeah, and Nebraska went today. Matt Rule really seems confident in their team. They got a true freshman quarterback, Dylan Raiola.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking to your colleague Mitch Sherman earlier today at the Athletic, and he's kind of taking a we'll see approach, but it sounds like the reviews on Raiola are just really positive for a true freshman. And so obviously he participated in spring ball, and that could be interesting because Iowa's going to catch him week 12. Probably better to catch a freshman quarterback early, I would think, but maybe not. Maybe you get more film on the guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but that's I don't know. That's it. These middle tier teams that Iowa's facing this year are going to be also interesting because Iowa only plays one of the top 6.
Mm-hmm.
They can't play themselves. But Ohio State is it. They don't play Ohio State. Don't play Oregon. They don't play Oregon. They don't play Penn State, Michigan, or USC. So Nebraska, I think, intriguing, very intriguing. Could be finally a big Black Friday game potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Playoff spot on the line. That
Playoffs?
might be a little much.
Are you kidding me? Playoffs?
But that's probably the Big Ten West title game we've all been waiting for. Maybe they are the two best teams in the old Big Ten West this year.
Yeah, I know. Showdown at the OK Corral here, I think Nebraska Nebraska's always had potential. They've always had players. It's been about the little things, the details that make Iowa so successful backfire in Nebraska. That's been the hallmark to me of these two teams over the years. Is Iowa's so fundamentally sound and physical and tough and does everything right, and it wins those games because it does that. Whereas you look at Nebraska, they find ways to lose games. They make mistakes. They do dumb things. And that's been universal, really since Bo Pelini left. That's what they've done. And so therefore, I think right now you're looking at them and saying, they've got potential, but Nebraska's slumped forever. How does this kind of measure up? I think with their schedule, they're more than capable to get to the 7-8 win range. And then let's see what happens late in the season, but they're also the type of team that can go and lose those games because those teams have beaten them in recent years, in Indiana and Illinois and Purdue. So while on paper you're going, oh, that could be a win. They're 7-0. We're going to Indianapolis.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's like, no, you're 4-3. You lost to Colorado last year, 36 to 13 or something like that. If you lose at home to that, it could be some long days ahead.
Yeah, still 5.5 weeks to the season opener, so plenty of time to kind of preview the season ahead, Scott. I have had a crazy day and I got more work to do, so I think let's wrap it up. I know you do too. Any final thoughts here from Indy?
One final thought, and it's not really Indianapolis related, Chad, but Iowa sold out of season tickets.
Yeah.
They sold out every ticket for this year. The last game was Washington, which is kind of funny in its own right, but it speaks well. It speaks well of what people think of this program, how excited they are. We kind of talked about that last week, but the Iowa State game was sold out at that point, but then boom, everything else went. That says a lot, because sometimes in years where people aren't as excited, that's when the Illinois States and Troys of the world, they're kind of scrambling and we got extra tickets, blah, blah, blah. And we've seen it before. I mean, 2015 opener, I think, was 59,000 or something like that, where Jack Trice was at 60. And I remember Jamie Pollard really saying, look, this is the first time that we've ever had more people in our stadium than any other stadium in the state that had a game. So, but this year it's all full.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a lot of anticipation for this season. And I feel like, I just kind of want to get a sense of whether I felt like any vibe of Kirk Ferentz, I don't know, slowing down or anything. But man, he's talking about next year. I just does not seem like he's slow. He turned 69 here in less than a week. It doesn't seem like he's, or a week, I guess. Doesn't seem like he's slowing down to me. I mean, I wouldn't anticipate this being his last year. So a lot of excitement, I think, in the program.
Most definitely. So, that's good. One thing about college football is you got to sell hope. And if you can sell hope, then that's what makes it fun, because the season itself, there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be, most years there's going to be a disappointment, a loss, whatever. And people are, I can't wait for basketball, whatever. But reality is that now everybody's still undefeated. Everybody's looking ahead. Yeah. And you don't wish your football season away. It's too fun. There's too much fun, great stuff going on.
Exactly. All right. For Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow. Be back with you next week here on Legends and Listeners, as always, from the Channel Seed Studios here on the Iowa Everywhere Network.